I think that the idea that Harvard is getting $9 billion and Columbia is getting whatever they are is in itself the true crime here. But I found it fascinating because they are now trying to push back. I think this is the fight that the Trump administration double and triple down on.
What the government has done is it's outsourced research to universities, and they are not allowed by Supreme Court rulings to attach political requirements to that. But they have been allowed to say you have to follow certain rules like the civil rights laws. Now, Barack Obama used that force to get them to strip males of their due process rights when they were accused of sexual malfeasance. So any girl who said, "You raped me," the guy was instantly convicted because of Obama, the pressure put on by the Obama administration. Joe Biden wanted to rewrite Title IX so it applied to poodles dressed up as women or whatever. It was just like anything that they decided was a woman could be decided as a woman. Nobody said a word about that. Nobody complained about it at all in the mainstream media. Suddenly, Donald Trump would like them to please stop hating Jews, and that's a problem. Donald Trump, as he has done so often throughout this brilliant second term, has chosen the things that reveal to us how bad the left is. We've got leftists defending the rights of gang members, and now we've got them defending basically the right of colleges to teach anti-Semitism. It is just despicable. You get college like Hillsdale that won't take a dime from the government, and they're absolutely free. If Harvard wants to do that, then they'll be absolutely free to teach whatever garbage they want to teach.
All right, guys. Let's end the week together. It is Good Friday as we enter the Easter Triduum. I appreciate you being with us during this very holy part of the year for us. What a week it's been. And I got to say, the highlight for me, went to the White House earlier this week, just to celebrate the U.S. Naval Academy winning the Commander-in-Chief trophy among the service academies. I was excited to be there, and then I get a nice little shout out from President Trump as the ceremony kicked off. Take a look.
Like that. I also want to thank some of the newly appointed members of the Naval Academy's Board of Visitors. Sean Spicer is here, and Walt Nauta. Sean, where's Sean Spicer? Sean, congratulations. It's a great honor. I can tell you, a lot of people wanted that position, so you guys are going to do it well. I have no doubt about it.
That was pretty cool, isn't it? Getting a little thing, but it got better. At the end of the ceremony, he says, "Sean, come out to the Oval Office with me." And I was like, okay, that was not on my bingo card. It was great to catch up with everybody, though. I got to see Secretary Hegseth for a little while, catch up with him. Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, was there. That was great. I got to hang out and talk to him for a little bit. Mike Waltz was there. I got to catch up with Vice President Vance later as well. General Dan Cain, the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, came up and said hi to me. And he's like, good. It was great how this all evolved. And I'm thinking, I remember Dan Cain when I was serving on the White House Commission on Fellows. And sure enough, I forgot to put two and two together. That's Raising Cain, guys. Here's the picture of me hanging out with him. He is now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He had retired as a 3-star general. Trump puts him up for the 4th star and to make him the chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the same time. Small world. It's also a reminder to treat people with respect and dignity, because you never know when the person you're hanging out with in the White House Fellows Commission becomes the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, only in Trump world. But anyway, I digress. I got to hang out in the Oval Office with the president. One of the nice features is swinging by there, some nice pictures of me. I got to check out the Declaration of Independence. Not bad, huh? Hanging right there. And it's funny because we were talking about it, and they had said, oh, we can't have it in there because of the light. And they said, well, what if we cover it? And sure enough, they did. So check it out. You get to see the picture there. There I am sitting in front of the Declaration of Independence, which normally would be in the archives. And there it is right there in the Oval Office. He has done a marvelous job decorating the Oval Office in full Trump style. And it's cool to see this. By the way, you do get a nice couple parting gifts. You get the M&Ms that say Donald Trump on them, and you get the White House cookies with the president's seal on them. Not bad. And by the way, for the military folks out there, you'll appreciate this. Yep, I got the president's coin. Check that out. President of the United States, 45th and 47th, and the seal of the president. And look at this. That's how big it is. Yeah, it fits in the palm of your hand. If you've been coined before, you know what I'm talking about. They don't normally look like that. These are pretty big. It was pretty cool. What a great way to spend part of the week with the President of the United States, catching up in the Oval Office. So kind, so generous with his time and his continued support. And by the way, he was critiquing the show. He's a big fan. It was cool to hear that. We're going through some of the segments and the shows and the guests, but so kind of him to give me the honor to be on the Naval Academy board again, and then spend time with him. So honored to continue to have his support, to be there for him, and obviously continue to thank him for everything he's done for me. And anyway, we have a great show coming your way. Andrew Klavan is going to be with us. Great discussion coming your way on Good Friday. He's got a brand new book out that I'm excited to talk to him because I want to cover a lot of stuff about culture and where we are as conservatives and what we've done for the movement. You know, Andrew Klavan, he doesn't disappoint. Before I get there, you guys know this. You want to start a day with a great cup of coffee. This is my recommendation. Wired to Fish. It is amazing, amazing cup of coffee with Arabica beans. They are sourced from some of the best places. I'm a big fan, as you guys know from watching the show, of the medium roast. You know, they've got all sorts of flavors. It depends on who you are, what your tastes are. But I love it. Whenever a group comes over, the morning meeting, my family, whatever, I bake a big pot. Everybody says they love it. What I like more than that is just not just the great cup of coffee, but knowing that this company is based and built on values that I support. It's so cool because 25% of the profits go back to faith-based initiatives, fishing initiatives, clean water initiatives. It's awesome. And when you go to wire2fishcoffee.com, and it's the numeral 2, you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about. Just great, great people. And I love voting with my wallet. I just got a shipment this week. Literally, I ordered, I pay for it myself. I happen to get one with the Sean Spicer Show Yeti. They are still available. They're discounted, by the way, if you want. But I'm telling you, it is such a great cup of coffee. So you can use the code WeCare, one word, WeCare, for 10% off. Go right over right now. This is a great time to do this. Wired2fishcoffee.com. Let's make 2025 a year that we align our values and our wallet, right? Drink a coffee that's good and you can feel good about going down. By the way, also this week, sorry to be rain on your parade. Tax day may have passed, but for millions of Americans, the real trouble may be ahead because the IRS is still on a rampage. If you have unfiled or you have back taxes and you missed the deadline, you guys know, I mean, I hate to say this, it's a reality. The IRS is going to come after you with over 5,000 new tax liens filed daily and tools that they have at their disposal, like property seizures and bank levies and wage garnishments. These guys are serious. But here's the good news. There is still time to get help. And the best people in the business, as far as I'm concerned, hands down, are the professionals at Tax Network USA. These guys have got you covered. They have a direct preferred line into the IRS. They literally know who to talk to and who to stay away from. So if you have unfiled or unpaid taxes, don't wait. Do not get behind the 8 ball when it comes to the IRS. Stop the penalties, stop the calls, stop the harassing, and get the professional help. You can talk for free to one of their strategists. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. One word, tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. You may have missed the deadline, but you are not out of time when it comes to getting help. Call the folks at Tax Network USA or visit them at tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. Okay, without further ado, my good friend, great author, great commentator, Andrew Klavan. Andrew, welcome back to the show. Always good to see you.
Good to see you, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, of course, you know, when Andrew Klavan comes out with a new book, you got to have him. So congrats on the book. I want to get to that in a minute. But obviously, as I said, it's in the show notes. People can order it, pre-order. It comes out May 6th. We'll get into the details in just a minute. But it is kind of fitting on Good Friday to be talking about a book where we're talking about God, talking about the darkness and the good that's in it. So it's a very fitting time to be talking about this.
Yeah, I always remind people this is a day when you originally experienced it. The people who originally experienced it in a moment of absolute despair, and you should remember that in your moments of despair and darkness. You know, the absolute failure of this movement that they had, that they thought was going to bring some kind of great revolution. They saw their leader crucified. They saw their people scattered. They themselves betrayed the man they loved the most. And yet there was actual hope on the horizon, right around the corner. An amazing thing to remember. As somebody who in my youth knew what despair was, it's an important thing to remember at all times.
All right, let's get back to that, because I do think you're right. Think about what Good Friday was such a moment of darkness for so many people to see their leader, and yet out of that darkness came this amazing moment. I don't think we fully appreciated what was happening then. It's funny though how much is talked about this, and obviously you're an expert on culture. You do this a lot on your show, but it was interesting at the Naval Academy this week was at the White House being honored by President Trump for winning the Commander-in-Chief trophy, the competition among the other service academies. And the president was noting that, Ohio State had just been there. The Dodgers had just been there. Obviously, I don't really care the Dodgers were there. I don't know what you think, but the point was, I thought about it in a different context, which was, it was almost like, it was cool again to be at the White House. When I was there and Trump won, it was, we're not going. We're protesting this. We're going to send a statement, and we're going to do this. And now these teams want to be there. They want to be excited. And I don't know, maybe to the theme of your book, I'm looking for the light in the darkness here. But I thought, what a cultural shift.
Oh, it's an amazing cultural shift. Funnily enough, I knew at the minute Trump was elected. I remember I was standing at the Daily Wire and we were watching it, and everyone had told me this was going to go on for days. And I kept saying, I think he's going to win, the popular vote, and I think he's going to win tonight. But when it actually happened, I had this sense, oh, we won. And what I meant by that was not that Trump had won, though I was really happy that Trump had won. What I meant was that the media, which has been such a corrupt, such a disruptive, and such an anti-American force in our culture, had been defeated by the little armies of the internet, people like you, people like the Daily Wire, that we had managed to expose them lying so often in real time that what they called our conspiracy theories turned out to be true so often. And that the fact that the people who had the most authority had lied so relentlessly had finally reached the voters, so that here was this man, Donald Trump, that they had demonized in every possible way. They had shot at him. They convicted him of a crime that nobody could name. They had accused him of every possible atrocity. And yet the people said, yeah, we want that guy over, Joe Biden, who's obviously passed away. And so I think that the great triumph was a triumph of media, which has been, to me, the center of the problem. I mean, it's not just the news media, it's the entertainment media as well, pouring out this false idea of what this country is, what it has been, what it should be. And we beat it. And I think that that's an amazing thing. And I think that the minute that happened, I think everybody who was paying attention, especially the young, thought, oh, it's okay. It's not just me realizing that this is dishonest. It's a lot of people around me. And that's why, in spite of the fact that it was not that big an electoral victory, that's why this immense shift took place almost instantaneously. People dumping idiot ideas like DEI and defund the police, ideas that only a child could think would have any good effect on the country, open borders. What an idiot idea this is, and suddenly it was all swept away because it had been held in place by a structure of condemnation, a social structure of condemnation that said, if you disagree with these things, you are the worst possible person. You're a racist, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, you're Hitler, the whole thing. And suddenly all of that was shown. It was not just shown to be a lie, but it was shown that the guy next to you thought it was a lie too, which is just incredibly empowering. And so, yeah, this has been a tremendous moment. And I only hope that the good guys, the people who believe in freedom and who believe in constitutional governance and who believe in the greatness of this country, I hope the good guys marshal their forces and start to create a culture of their own that goes beyond commentary and negative attacks on them.
As you're thinking, as you were speaking, I was starting to think about it. Like, these law firms are all caving and they're saying, how much can we give you in pro bono services? Big business has largely caved, partially because people like Robbie Starbuck are out there fighting, partially because of Donald Trump's victory. But there's two institutions that I don't think have caved, Hollywood and the media. And I'm wondering if it's just that they're that dug in. Is it that they didn't get it? Is it, why of all of the institutions are they the two?
Well, I think,
or am I wrong? Look, I want Andrew Klavan to give me this answer, but or am I just misreading that?
Well, Hollywood is on the brink. They're out of cash. Their movies their woke movies that they made no money, which was fine for a while as long as they were getting the social kickback that they wanted, the awards, the prestige, the interviews, the love. As long as they felt that they were getting that, they were fine because they'd make money overseas. But now I think it's been revealed that these movies don't make money and that we don't like them. Because remember, they were part of the media that was selling us that Donald Trump was Hitler as well. So I think that what is needed in Hollywood is competition. What is needed in Hollywood is people, creative people on the right, not right-wingers trying to be creative, but creative people who are traditionalists and faithful people and who believe in freedom, that they have to start making stuff. And they don't have to make movies for billions of dollars. They just have to make stuff that appears on the internet and captures the interest of the audience. I mean, what I would like to see is I would like to see a section of the internet turned into Greenwich Village in 1960 with artists showing up and showing their wares and attracting the young, because the young have got it. And if you start making good stuff and not propagandistic, stiff-minded, small-minded, this is conservative propaganda stuff, they'll show up and Hollywood will crumble. They will conform once that audience is created by the right. The news media is in a really interesting vice. They put forward, if you watch CNN or you read the New York Times, you have to be a left-winger to take that seriously. I mean, the New York Times is it's like, I read it for comedy at this point. You used to be able to read it for a kind of liberal point of view. Now it's just like a bunch of old ladies screaming in a burning building, it's Trump, Trump, Trump. And so there's nothing there, but the only people who are reading it are the kind of people who fall for it. And so if they are to start to say, you know what, maybe we got some stuff wrong, they're going to lose that audience. So they're stuck. So once again, I feel like the answer is competition, and the area where we need to compete, where we have fallen down. And again, I'm talking about everybody from the center right to the, intelligent further right. What we need is reporting power. The New York Times, a terrible, terrible newspaper, has more reporting power than probably all of the podcasts and internets and, daily wires put together. They have an immense amount of reporting power. You remember how with Sarah Palin, they basically parachuted like 50 reporters into her backyard to find some kind of dirt on her so they could destroy her. And we don't have the power yet to do that. And once we have reporting power, because we have a lot of people who want to give their opinions, which is great, but we also need people who can go on the scene, do what guys like Douglas Murray have been doing in Israel, and actually appear and come back and say, this is what I saw, this is who I interviewed. So in both cases, we have to depend on the new machinery, the new technology that allows us to reach people, but also make the stuff that needs to be made, namely entertainment and reporting. And I think we can do it. I think, look at the sea change that came over the left in its dealings with Elon Musk when he took over X. They're pretending that it's about Doge, but it's about X. The minute he said, I am going to let everybody speak, he went from being the darling of environmentalists right. to being, Snidely Whiplash, the most evil man in America. That's how much the left understands their control of the culture and what it means. And to take it back, we have to make it. We have to make culture. And culture is not just art, not just movies and storytellings, but it's also reporting. And so if we do it, if we seize the day, I think the day is ours for the next 25 to 50 years.
All right, I want to break that apart in two pieces. First, on your Hollywood comment, I had a buddy of mine several years ago who was a self-avowed liberal, but he was a business guy, a money guy, a film fund guy, and he approached what movies they would fund rather in Hollywood on a formula that he created. He was, as much as he was a liberal, he was a business guy at heart. And he had a formula, and he could tell by the script or whatever, the ticket, like whether it's going to do well. And he said to me something really funny, Andrew. He said, if you go look at the movies, and again, this is a guy self-described liberal. He said, look at Surfer Girl, that Bethany Hamill movie, and all these other movies that are Christian-leaning, right-leaning. They all make a boatload of money. And yet they won't ever get the funding. And so when you made these comments, I'm thinking to myself, there's two ways to address this. Either Hollywood ultimately changes its ways, or outlets like the Daily Wire get into the entertainment space. Is it one or the other or both?
Now, I think it's probably more that conservatives get into the entertainment space first. That's going to happen first. And again, it can't be conservatives who want to be artists. It's got to be artists who have a traditionalist bent or a faith-based bent. I was once sitting at a dinner table with the great Senator Ted Cruz, and Ted went around the table asking people, what do you know that other people don't know? And when he got to me, I said, what I know is in Hollywood, they don't care about money. And everybody says, oh, Hollywood is just about money. It's not. And right. The proof of this is Mel Gibson makes Passion of the Christ. He basically takes $25 million out of his wallet, and he makes this movie, and it makes $1 billion. It's one of the biggest hits in history. Clint Eastwood makes American Sniper after 20 anti-war on terror movies are made, and they all bomb, and his movie is a hit only because it shows the Americans are the good guys, which is true. When Mel Gibson made Passion of the Christ, virtually every studio started a faith-based division to pick up that money that was lying there on the ground. And yet when they made movies like Noah or the one about Moses, they went out of their way to offend the audience that would come to see them. So Noah was a movie about environmentalism instead of about sin and God. And Moses, Christian Bale came out and said, well, Moses was kind of a terrorist. And then when the movies bombed, they were like, well, I guess Bible movies aren't making any money. Because
like Snow White, though, they just blew up Snow White.
Exactly. So because talent has so much power, this wasn't true. This wouldn't have happened in the studio days, but the studios are gone. It's because the talent has so much power, and because talent gets a lot of prestige and a lot of awards and a lot of love from being leftist. Because of that, it's always going to shift to the left. Another good example is Law and Order, made by Dick Wolf, a Republican. Starts out for the first 2 years, it's conservative, but as the writers shift out of the writer's room and new writers come in, it becomes a completely leftist show. And so the power of talent is just so big that what you're going to have is you're going to have people who say, no, this is the script. This is what we're making. If this movie star doesn't want to make it, we'll find this guy and make him a star. But again, it has to be done by artists, not by political people. So that's the problem in Hollywood. That's why they're so dug in.
I'm so glad you brought up Law and Order. I loved that show forever. I mean, I literally, and now when you watch it, Olivia Benson's talking about, her whiteness and privilege and how she needs to atone for the sins, and criminals are just, I literally can't stand it anymore. And it's upsetting because you're right. Dick Wolf was a good Republican. When that show came out, I loved it. And they were like, let's figure out how to ruin it. But to the second point that you were making about the media, and this is what I find fascinating, Andrew. I did this speech down at Florida International University going back 6 months ago, maybe even longer, to the journalism school. And one of the students said to me, what do you think about the decline of journalism? And I said, well, with all due respect, it's not declining, it's flourishing. And they said, what do you mean? I go, go look at Substack. These journalists who don't want to be part of Bari Weiss, even some leftists who didn't want to be part of newsrooms anymore went and are now making a boatload of money, creating a newsletter where they are reporting, they're hiring other journalists, but they're not adhering to, the left bent of the New York Times, maybe, if you will. And so to your point about that, do you think that that's where the future is? Like, it's just more independent journalists creating and then building a model where it's, hey, give me $7 a month or $10 a month, and I will make it an independent journalist effort here that's independent of the New York Times or the Washington Post?
Yes. The short answer is yes. That is where I think the future is. Ultimately, I suspect those sites will build up like Barry's site has built up. Free Press has become virtually a newspaper. And she is she's a liberal person, but she obviously likes to hear different points of view, which is refreshing. And yes, that is exactly what I think will happen. And that's what I think will happen in the arts too. I mean, we're really a few years away from somebody with a credit card and an imagination being able to make a movie on his own. I mean, with AI, it's going to take out so many of the costs of special effects and locations and all these things. And soon you'll be able to make a movie virtually by yourself because you'll be able to bring in voice, create voices and create faces and all kinds of things. And I believe that is the future. These things have become so corporate, and the corporations were then taken over by the leftist talent. So basically the inmates are running the asylum, and that has got to change. And look, there's this idea that goes around that conservatives are not creative. I believe that to be largely false. There's a certain amount of truth to it when it comes to conservative businessmen. A conservative businessman would much rather invest his money in an oil well than in a movie. And, it's because he has common sense. He's going to make more money off the oil well than the movie. But a leftist says, give me that influence, give me that power, give me that voice into the culture, and then buys a movie studio. And that's a big difference between us. But conservatives have been blacklisted. I know. I had a big income in Hollywood, and I lost it the minute I opened my mouth. It went from a large income to zero almost overnight. So there's nobody waiting outside the door, just in the same way when they finally let blacks in to be managers in baseball teams, there were no managers available. And I remember a broadcaster losing his job because he said, well, I just don't think blacks can do the job of being a manager. Well, no, when you keep people out for 100 years and you open the door, nobody's waiting out there for you to be nice to them. You have to let them, you have to understand that they are welcome in. Once those venues open up, I believe the conservatives, and again, it doesn't have to be conservatives. It just has to be people who tell the truth. Any story that's true will be a conservative story. I mean, that's just the fact. Any story that is not a lie will ultimately have some conservative idea in it, because that's all conservatism is realism.
What about a movie about oil wells? That would be the combination. So if you got the conservatives just to make movies about oil wells, then it's a win-win, right? I mean, you combine their desire.
Yeah. No, movies that are never made are movies in which a woman would like to be a homemaker and a mother, movie in which the business guy is the right guy. The last movie like that was Ghostbusters, a fantastic movie in which nobody remembers, but the villain is the EPA. But
look at like Angel Studios. Like you talk about Cabrini, a strong woman who goes out there and founds an order, of sisters that does so much good, and yet that wasn't picked up by the studios. Angel Studios is doing a lot of this work, having massive success, but it's almost like they can't portray a woman doing conservative things because, it undermines the theory that men are bad, that women can't just do independently good stuff. But I love so many of the films that Angel is putting out. And they clearly are successful at doing it. And by the way, their model is, we'll crowdsource this so we know it's got an audience. It's a beautiful model and great movies that come out of it. And I think this is, and they're making a boatload of cash.
What Angel did that really was a game changer was they created an alternative method of distribution. That's the bottleneck, is distribution. Because like I said, virtually anybody can make a movie if you have a credit card and some talent, but to get it out there to make sure people see it is still a very difficult thing to do. It's difficult in the publishing industry now, where basically if you're a white male, it's very hard to get your book sold, and you can publish something beautifully by yourself, but it's hard to get that distribution method out there unless you already have a big audience and can use that audience. So that's what Angel Studios did. They made that wonderful movie Sound of Freedom. They distributed it in an absolutely new way, and that really did change the game, and people have to imitate that.
As I'm thinking about it, as we're talking, I think the other institution that hasn't gotten is academia. And we saw the Trump administration this week push back on Harvard. And to me, I frankly, first of all, I was just appalled to find out that Harvard, with this massive endowment, is getting $9 billion with a B dollars a year of our tax dollars. First of all, I think that in itself, regardless of whether or not they're DEI or not DEI or whatever, or anti-Semitic, I think that the idea that Harvard is getting $9 billion and Columbia is getting whatever they are is in itself the true crime here. But I found it fascinating because they are now trying to push back. I think this is the fight that the Trump administration double and triple down on.
I actually agree with this. The thing is, what the government has done is it's outsourced research to universities. So that's research is where, universities are where the scientists are, where the professors are. So they say, here's, $1 billion and go find out how we can build a better bomb or do the kinds of things the government wants to do. And they are not allowed by Supreme Court rulings to attach political requirements to that, but they have been allowed to say you have to follow certain rules, like the civil rights laws. Now, Barack Obama used that force to get them to strip males of their due process rights when they were accused of sexual malfeasance. So any girl who said, you raped me, the guy was instantly convicted because of Obama, the pressure put on by the Obama administration. Joe Biden wanted to rewrite Title IX so it applied to poodles dressed up as women or whatever. It was just like anything that they decided was a woman could be decided as a woman. Nobody said a word about that. Nobody complained about it at all in the mainstream media. Suddenly, Donald Trump would like them to please stop hating Jews, and that's a problem. Now he's a tyrant. So I think, Donald Trump, as he has done so often throughout this brilliant second term, has chosen the, things that reveal to us how bad the left is. We've got leftists defending the rights of gang members while, basically shrugging off the rights of American citizens who don't want to be killed by gang members. And now we've got them defending basically the right of colleges to teach anti-Semitism. It is just despicable. I understand why the government gives money to colleges, but you get college like Hillsdale that won't take a dime from the government, and they're absolutely free. If Harvard wants to do that, then they'll be absolutely free to teach whatever garbage they want to teach.
That's a great point. I mean, these guys act like somehow, like, great, Hillsdale doesn't take it. I don't know that maybe Liberty University does some now, but I know for a while they didn't. And those are great institutions. I don't know why. I mean, here's the thing. Do you think that I mentioned that Trump should double and triple down on this, but if you had a crystal ball and looked ahead, do you think that we ultimately win the fight against, because I think this is bigger. Like, when you think about what college and university does to indoctrinate the next generation of Americans, I think this is really the fight worth having, right? You raise your kids, you can send them to whatever school you want through high school. You're there to hold their hand, K through 12, they come home. But when they go to college, that's when you're not there anymore. And the college gets a free shot at indoctrinating them. I think from a Trump administration standpoint, this is a critical fight to have, to start removing this, because it's more than just the funding. It's about making sure that we have a fair fight, that conservatives can be on campus, that there's not an indoctrination anymore. But if you're going to have one big fight, I think this has got to be it, because higher learning is like the gateway drug to wokeism.
That's exactly right. I mean, the people in the news media who are corrupting their audiences and the people in Hollywood who are corrupting their audiences are mostly graduates from high-level institutions that have polluted their minds with a theory that is developed. Now, since it's Good Friday, I will offer this insight, because the theories that have destroyed our academic life, that have destroyed especially the liberal arts in academia, so that it's virtually useless to go and get an English degree like I did way back in the 1970s, and I got a great education in English literature. Now it's useless because they're teaching you that you have to be transgressive, that all these books should be used to destroy, anti-feminist ideas or anti-communist ideas, whatever it is. The problem is the train of thought that led them to the stuff, the truly trashy stuff they're teaching now, all grows out of atheism. It all grows out of materialism, the idea that everything is stuff. And if we don't start to push the idea that, God is a reality. It's not a religion. It's not even about religion. It's about the reality of the fact that we live in a created world, and that creation is a beautiful thing. It's not a problem that there are men and women. It is a gift that there are men and women, and we should emphasize, people act that because, women wear dresses and men wear pants, that somehow that's where their femininity and masculinity comes from. But no, that's something we do because we love the fact that there are men and women. We celebrate it and we enhance it because it's a gift we've gotten from our Creator. If we don't start talking bluntly about the fact that God is the first principle of reality, and if we don't start making that argument as conservatives, because it's not going to happen on the left, we're going to lose this fight in academia especially. And because these are well thought out ideas, I've read a lot of these ideas that they're teaching, and they're well thought out ideas that depend upon an idea that everything just evolved accidentally, that we're all just flesh, that if I cut off my bits and reshape my body into a woman's body, suddenly I'm a woman, which is a complete nonsense. And those ideas make sense if we're living in a materialist world. But not only does all human experience testify against that, but science now testifies against that too. We now know that consciousness comes before reality. And if that's true, well, where did reality come from? So look, I'm not trying to prove the existence of God. I'm simply saying that those of us who believe have got to start talking like we believe and stop accepting the materialist dictum that you can't make an argument from God. That's not true. You have to make our arguments from God. When people say, for instance, like my friend Matt Walsh, when he says, what is a woman? The answer to that is a spiritual answer, not necessarily just a physical answer. A woman is an actual internal thing that happens to you when you are born female. And just like, masculinity is a spiritual thing that happens to you when you're born male. And if we don't start talking about that and celebrating creation as it was given to us, I think ultimately we're just going to get out debated by idiots who believe things that are not tenable and not really believable.
But, to your point, words matter here. I was thinking as you were talking, like this whole week, the media keeps talking about this man from Maryland that was deported, right? In the same way that we talk about what is a woman.
Yeah.
And I know that's but as you were talking about this, I kept thinking to myself, this is exactly, the words matter in all of this. Like in the same way that Matt asked, what is a woman? And people couldn't answer the question, right? And then, by the way, he did, am I a racist, or am I racist, which I also love. But like when you start saying, like when this story came on to the forefront, I was thinking to myself, oh my God, a Maryland man got deported. That's horrible.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize he's as much of a Maryland man as I am an astronaut. Like, and I joked with somebody, they said, well, he was in Maryland. I said, okay, so let's just back this up for a second. If I'm in Foxborough watching the New England Patriots, am I a patriot? Like what, because they were like, well, he was in Maryland. I'm like, okay, that doesn't make him a Maryland man.
Right.
As much as that makes me like, I can go to a restaurant and be eating and be, a McDonald's owner. It's like, they are using the words to create a narrative. And I think this gets back to this idea of culture and everything else, that you want to dilute this because this goes to the heart of what you're talking about. This is it's agnostic. We can't make it spiritual. We have to make everything like a Maryland man. What is a woman? Because if we have a conversation about spiritual stuff, it undermines the left's entire argument.
That's right. And it's so much about language. If it weren't about language, they wouldn't police language with the force that they do. Anything you say that is a fact becomes racist. So you've got to somehow work around that to not be called racist. Now, I don't know whether they're particularly good at this, because it has always seemed to me the left has been much better at naming things. So, Ron DeSantis in Florida passes a perfectly good law about leaving children alone, keeping your sexual perversion out of the minds of elementary school kids. And they immediately call it the Don't Say Gay law. And you think that's pretty good. That does make you sound kind of silly. My favorite, I think, was in a morbid way, was gender affirming care, which is butchering children in the completely superstitious idea that will change their sex. I mean, that's a Joseph Mengele Nazi doctor level atrocity. And yet they came up with this beautiful phrase for gender affirming care. And, one of the rare letters I ever wrote to an editor was when the Wall Street Journal used that. I said, what are you talking about? It's like Joseph Mengele using like Jew affirming care. What kind of insanity is that? But they're so good at it. I think they're really good at it because they have owned the media. And I think that is the big change, that because of the internet, because we have defeated the Biden administration's attempt to silence voices on the right, because Elon Musk took over X, because the Daily Wire exists, because of all of these things, we have taken back the ability to impose a different vision on the culture, and hopefully one that is supportive of freedom, of the individual, of the holiness of being a human being. These are things that we should not be afraid to talk about. When I talk to my friends in England, I lived in England for a long time. When I talk to my friends in England, they almost can't understand what you're talking about when you talk about God. It's been so beaten out of them. So Vice President Vance was correct when he said you can get arrested in England and put in jail in England for praying silently too near an abortion clinic, even if you're praying silently in your own home. When I say to people in Britain, when I say to my friends, what on earth are you talking about? They don't even really realize that is a fundamental, transgression against human rights. They don't realize it. And if we don't start to use the language properly, and we don't start to use it fearlessly, then we're going to be in that same situation. This is the gift of Donald Trump. From the very beginning, when I first saw Donald Trump, I was like horrified. I thought, who the hell is this guy who is running for president? And then I started to realize, they have so wrapped us up in chains of political correctness. We are so afraid to speak, so afraid to move, that it takes a guy like this to break those chains. And when he starts to win elections and when he starts to become popular with the young, suddenly people think like, oh, I can do that too. He has done a great, great service to this country simply by being himself. And I think in a moment when any other country almost no other country would have produced a character like Trump. He's an incredibly American character who would break those chains. And I think we have to follow him in the sense of being fearless and speaking our minds. Look, I don't want people to be hateful either. I don't want people to be racist and cruel to each other and, hate each other on stupid grounds of, what color your skin is. But I do want to speak the truth, no matter who it brings into focus. Even if I say there's a lot of crime in black neighborhoods, that's not a racist statement. That's a true statement. And it's only an act of kindness to address that problem. So I think that the truth, fearlessness, all of these things are things that are in the offing in this moment, and we should seize that moment.
So, like I said, your book, The Kingdom of Cain, Finding God in the Literature of Darkness. When we started the week, I went on a rant because Saturday Night Live kicked off Holy Week in their cold open by mocking Donald Trump. And frankly, my opinion, mocking Easter and the beauty of this week for so many Christians. And yet I can't find the light in that. I can't find the good in that literature of darkness.
Well,
help me.
The problem that we have, I think, is, listen, I admire Christians in Hollywood and Christians in the book publishing business, which is also a really important source of information and entertainment, in that they have found their audience and they serve their audience. And that is a beautiful thing, and it has shown the way for other people to do other things. But what constitutes Christian art has become, I won't say corrupted, but it's become kind of diluted. That's the word I want. It's become diluted. If you go back to the height of Christian art, which was the height of art, as far as I'm concerned, in all the world, when you go back to Bach and you go to Mozart and you go to Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel and even Shakespeare, who I would include very much as a Christian artist, an artist shaped by Christianity, you are talking about the greatest artists who ever lived, and you're talking about the greatest art ever created, and it covered the world as it really is. You can go to Shakespeare and read Macbeth, and it's a play about murder, it's a play about betrayal, it's a play about just absolute atrocities, and yet you come away realizing that when Macbeth says life is meaningless, a tale told by an idiot, he is saying that because he has separated himself from the moral order and from God, and so he's lost in a meaningless world. Shakespeare isn't saying the world is meaningless. Macbeth is saying the world is meaningless because he has transgressed against God. So what the Kingdom of Cain is about the fact that when great artists take on the subject of evil, and I use murder as an example of evil because there's simply no debating that murder is evil. When great artists take on the subject of evil, they reveal God, even though they're dealing with situations and with people who are not that pleasant. The idea that Christianity has to be pleasant, that it has to be nice, that it has to be family-oriented, and it has to come with happy endings, actually dilutes the power of Christianity, because when we turn to life, life is not that way. Life is filled with all kinds of obscenity and atrocity, and if you're not prepared for that as a Christian, I think you lose your faith. I became a Christian so late in life. I was baptized when I was 49. I already realized before I embraced God that in order for me to believe, I had to believe in a God of the sad world, a God of this world, not a God of some fairyland that I didn't see existing. So what the Kingdom of Cain is about is a study of murders and how great artists have created art out of those murders, inspired by those murders, and sometimes not great artists have created art, and how that reveals something bright and illuminating about God. It is a way of saying that artists create beauty out of reality. And I believe that that is the answer to the problem of evil. People who don't believe sometimes say, well, how can there be an all good, all knowing God if there's so much evil? And the answer is that God sees the beauty of the whole design. And when we see the beauty of the whole design, we will understand. In the meantime, think of a statue like the Pietà. If you've ever seen Michelangelo's Pietà, probably the most beautiful sculpture ever made anywhere. And yet it's a picture of what? Of darkness, of a dead child, a mother with her dead child, of a world with a dead God. It's a portrayal of the worst thing that has ever happened anywhere, and yet it's beautiful. And the question the Kingdom of Cain asks is, if a mortal man can make such beauty out of such sorrow and grief and terror and evil, what can God make of this world once we see his entire plan? And so that's what I want from artists. I want honesty. I want a little less piety. I want a little less conservatism, and I want a lot more truth in their art. And then they will be able to make great art that will reveal the truth to its audience. And that's what we need.
You know, maybe I'm just new to the game, but I'm used to reading Andrew Klavan fiction. And I was fascinated when you came out with the Kingdom of Cain and really pierced this subject of finding good in darkness. Like what was it that made you go, okay, I gotta get back into nonfiction?
Well, it was two streams of thought. One is I get asked constantly from Christians these letters that start out, "You call yourself a Christian," and the rest of it is, and I think, well, so far you're right. And they say, "You call yourself a Christian, but you write about murder, you write about prostitutes, you write about gangsters, you write about people who curse and use dirty words." And I think, like, that's the world I see, this is the world in which I believe in God. I don't believe in God in like Oz, in this fairyland where everything is great. I believe in God in this world. And I want to depict that world, because if you can't derive faith from that, you can't derive a faith that will stand. So that was one thing. And the other thing is I had written a book called The Truth and Beauty, which was about poetry and how I believe certain poems, even though that they're not religious poems, reveal, say important things about the Gospels. And I realized that for a long time, Sean, our professors and our teachers have been teaching literature without reference to God. But in fact, almost every work of literature ever written has been written in some way to address the problems that only exist if there's a God. Problems like evil, problems like love, problems like death. These are problems that aren't problems if we're just here and we're monkeys and then we die. Then there's no problem. There's no philosophical problem. But every work of literature that is a work of literature, every work of art that is a work of art, addresses these problems as if there were some reason to believe that life makes sense and there is a moral order. And so what I think is we should return to the arts and take a look at the old books and the new books and say, okay, this is about a subject that maybe scares me a little or depresses me or frightens me. And yet, if I put my trust in the artistic process, I will find something new that will restore my faith. That's been my experience. My experience is that if I look at something, The Sopranos, great example. The Sopranos, absolutely violent, vicious story about terrible people doing terrible things. But if you watch it very closely, it is actually a very faith-based story that is showing you through the darkness where the light is. There's wonderful episodes in that where, like, Christ is virtually present, and the only people who can't see him are the gangsters, the people in the story. But you can see them if you're watching carefully.
All right, I will get my Tony Soprano fix this weekend. Andrew Klavan, the book Kingdom of Cain is out May 6th, available for pre-order right now. Please go take a look at it. It is not disappointing. I was able to peruse this thing before we sat down. Very impressive, as always. Thank you for joining us. I hope you and your family have a very, very happy and blessed Easter.
You too, Sean. Thanks. It's great to see you.
You bet. All right, guys. Again, that book is available. You can hit the links in the bio to pre-order. Available May 6th. But do what you can. Get out there. Order it now to help Andrew get those pre-orders up. Anyway, have a great Easter. Thanks for subscribing to my newsletter, SeanSpicer.com. There's a new edition out today. Make sure you subscribe. It is free. VIP members are always looking forward to it. Have a great weekend. A very happy Easter, and we'll see you on Monday. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.